Determined to spread the word in foreign hostile land, exclusive footage shows a plan to circulate Christian ideas in Afghanistan. Are US soldiers in the Muslim world on a mission from God or from their government? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Mariam Namazi. Preaching the Bible in Afghanistan, an exclusive report by Al Jazeera correspondent James Bays has been an international talking point this week. In the report, US soldiers appear to be preparing to attempt to convert Afghans to Christianity. The footage was shot a year ago inside Bagram military base and shows troops at prayer and Bible study. Well, Bibles can be seen printed in Dari and Pashto, the two main languages used in Afghanistan. During the report, soldiers are heard talking about spreading the word and getting around the rules. The rule they're talking about is the US military's General Order No. 1, and that bans proselytizing of any faith, religion or practice, meaning troops are not allowed to try to convert anyone to their own beliefs.
You cannot proselytize, but you can give gifts. Okay, let's talk about it. What do you think?
Well, to get around the rule, they talk about giving Bibles as gifts. When asked for their reaction, Admiral Mike Mullen denied that preaching Christianity in this way is practiced by the US military.
My reaction is twofold. One is that I'm not aware of the details of this and certainly want to know more about it. Secondly, it certainly is, from the United States military's perspective, not our position to ever push any specific kind of religion, period.
Well, joining us now are our guests in Kabul, Colonel Greg Julian. He's a spokesman for US forces in Afghanistan. Also in Kabul, Sayed Alamuddin Asir. He's a member of the Islamic Front for Peace and Understanding. And in Washington, D.C., Al Jazeera correspondent James Bays. Colonel Julian, if I can come to you first, the footage that we've seen seems to indicate that this evangelical group at Bagram Air Base is being encouraged to spread Christianity. You have Bibles here in the local languages, Dari and Pashto, and we see Army Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Gary Hensley encouraging servicemen to proselytize. Clearly this is wrong, isn't it?
Well, the problem is that this information, this video, was presented in a way to make it appear that that was the case, but this is really inappropriate and irresponsible contortion of what really took place. One soldier received some Bibles from the church he belonged to in the United States, and he did not solicit them, but when he received them, he brought them to the attention of his chaplain and this Bible study group. And what it doesn't show in the video that was presented was that the chaplain counseled all of these soldiers in that Bible study session on the fact that they could not distribute.
Okay, well let me stop you there and put some of what you say to James Bays in Washington, D.C. James, Colonel Julian has called your reporting into question. He says that you've taken things out of context. Do you still stand by your report?
Well, I've spent a lot of time in Afghanistan this year. I know Colonel Julian, and I believe he's an honourable man, but I need to ask him this question. Has he seen the full unedited footage? Because I've watched it repeatedly, my producers watched it, the most senior journalist here at Al Jazeera in Washington has watched it. We're not contorting anything. And I think what we will do now is Al Jazeera will put up more of this footage, unedited, and there'll be a link to it on our website. People can see for themselves. It's quite clear what happens in this video. He says the Bibles were unsolicited. Well, in the conversation that's recorded on videotape, we have it, we will put it up on the website. One of the soldiers said, I've been serving in Afghanistan for some time. I'm about to go to my next posting. I was worried the Bibles weren't going to arrive on time, and praise the Lord, the Bibles have arrived today.
Colonel Julian, what's your response to that? Have you actually seen the footage?
I've only seen what's been presented on the network, and but I have talked to people at Bagram who were present then, and said that during that counseling session, the chaplain told the group that they could not distribute those books. They were confiscated, and they've never been distributed.
Well, James, what's your response to that these Bibles have never actually been handed out to local Afghans, that they haven't been distributed to members of the local population?
Well, I have seen the footage, and actually, if he hasn't seen the footage, would describe it as a professional slur on my work to say that in some way we've been trying to trick anyone. And as I say, we'll put up the unedited footage so the viewer can decide for themselves. The fact that Bibles were confiscated, that was not filmed by the filmmaker. The filmmaker Brian Hughes I've spent some time with, and we went through the tape in some detail with Brian Hughes. I watched it with Brian Hughes, and he says the Bibles weren't confiscated when he was there. He knew nothing about that until the military made that statement after we had broadcast our footage. He says that the way that that things ended at the end of his filming is that the Bibles were distributed among the soldiers. He was even given one. He has a copy of one of those Bibles, a Bible in Pashto.
Okay, well, Mr. Saeed Alam Udenasir, let me bring you in at this point. What did you make of this report? We see Bibles in Pashto and Dari, one of the soldiers describing them as gifts for the people of Afghanistan.
Being printed Bible in Pashto in Dari and finding it in the military bus, United States military bus in Bagram, it shows that some people want to intentionally distribute this Bible, this book among the Afghans. Also, that we have received the news from different schools that this Bible also distributed in school to school children. And that this issue also raised by some mosques leaders, mosque imams, and they ask government of Afghanistan to take this issue seriously and act against this action, because it is very sensitive action among the people of Afghanistan, that the military people can distribute this book among the Afghans. Even this is prohibited in the American military, that the law and order of American military.
Colonel Julian, what's your response to that? Regardless of whether or not these Bibles were actually distributed, the fact that they exist in the local languages of Afghanistan, in Dari and Pashto, suggests that the intention was there to distribute them amongst Afghans.
There was a church group in the United States that sent these forward. But when they were brought to the attention of the military leadership, they were confiscated and they were never distributed. Simple and plain. It is against our policies. We don't push religion on any other nation. We allow for all of our soldiers to practice their own religion within the confines of our own military base. But there is never.
But should you really be encouraging troops in Afghanistan to be giving out Bibles in Dari and Pashto?
They were not encouraged to distribute these Bibles. In fact, the leadership confiscated the Bibles. Simple and plain.
In the footage, the chaplain endorses the idea of giving gifts but not proselytizing. Colonel Julian, what is the difference between those two things?
The context of that statement was when the chaplain was asking the students in this Bible study class about what proselytizing was and if they knew whether or not it was against the rules. And they in fact did, except for this one individual. And that's when the chaplain made it clear to the group that they could not distribute the Bibles, and that's why they were confiscated. And what the student was suggesting was maybe a way around the proselytizing law or regulation by giving them as gifts, and he was told that that was not acceptable.
James Bays, what's your response to that?
Well, that's just not what is in the footage. That is not in the footage that I've watched, and I have a full transcript of the footage here. That is not what happens. The man in question, who's called Sergeant Watt, says you can give gifts. That's not proselytizing. He gives examples of how he gave Bibles as gifts when he was serving in Iraq, Bibles in Arabic. He gives an example of giving a Bible to a carpet seller. He says that when he bought the carpet afterwards, as a thank you, he gave over the Bible. He also says he was based at Camp Liberty. There was building work being being done. There were some plumbers in. He gave the plumbers a Bible as a gift. And during this, the chaplain sits there nodding and says, not proselytizing, giving gifts. He acknowledges this. He appears to support this idea that you can get round that rule in General Order Number 1 on proselytizing by giving Bibles as gifts. That's in the footage. We've broadcast much of that material. We're going to put more of it up on our website.
Colonel Julian, do you think that it's a good thing in a country where there are great religious, cultural sensitivities about conversion and where the US has faced opposition to its presence in the country? Is it really a good thing to be handing out Bibles or to even have these Bibles when your own rules seem to discourage that?
That's precisely why we have the regulation prohibiting that, but also presenting this video and insinuating that these Bibles were given to Afghans is also irresponsible and dangerous because it could incite people to violence and cause death, which I think is very irresponsible.
Mr. Asir, do you agree with what Colonel Julian says there, that this will have quite an impact on the local population, that it could incite violence?
Yes, I agree that this distribution will create violence among the people, yes.
Colonel Julian, was anyone in the tape reprimanded? What has happened to the people in that tape?
Well, do remember that this video was taken a year ago, and it's just now being made available to us. So as soon as I learned of this report yesterday morning, and I do want to remind you that nobody contacted me or Bagram before this report was issued to get our position on what might have happened or what the story was behind this.
Okay, James, what's your response to that?
And I think that's also irresponsible.
Yes, well, we did contact the military. I mean, I'm currently in Washington, D.C., not in Afghanistan, so I didn't go and see Colonel Julian himself, but the tape was actually given to the military 72 hours before it was broadcast. We gave them the footage. The filmmaker Brian Hughes sent them a copy of the footage. I was dealing with the Pentagon in the hours before we first broadcast the report. I'll give you the name. Darren James was the name of the press officer at the Pentagon I was dealing with, and he said, look, I can't give you a statement on this.
The problem is not limited to Afghanistan. While the American Constitution outlines the basic concept of religious freedom, the Pentagon has faced several lawsuits over claims that right was denied. Just last year, 2 atheist American soldiers claimed they noticed a pattern of discrimination against non-Christians in the military and sued the U.S. Department of Defense. One of them said that he had been contacted by more than 8,000 members of the military, almost all of them complaining of pressure to embrace evangelical Christianity. Right now, nearly 11,000 soldiers have lodged similar complaints with just one of the many government watchdogs. Okay, well, let's return to our guest now, Colonel Julian. Let me put one of those points there to you. Mikey Weinstein, head of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, said his group now receives more than 500 complaints of religious bias a month from members of the military. Is the U.S. military turning a blind eye to this problem?
This is all news to me. To the best of my knowledge, the military makes provisions for all members to practice religion in their own way to the greatest extent possible. I've been in the Army for 28 years, and I have never seen an indication of pressure that you suggest.
Mr. Asir, how harmful are incidents like this? What could their potential impact be, especially after U.S. President Barack Obama has insisted that the U.S. is not at war with Islam at a time when the U.S. appears to be trying to build bridges with the Muslim world?
You know that in Afghan society, all the people, they believe to Islam. There is no one single Christian and Jewish people in here. If this kind of issue repeated in Afghanistan and distribution of the Bible and calling for Christianity, it creates more things more bad things among the people of Afghanistan. The relation of people of Afghanistan with the foreign soldiers and with the Western will become a bad and this kind, because this is, you know, that the Islam is recognized freedom of religious, but not propagation it creates more problem. Afghan peoples now have more problem. For example, killing of innocent people by the troops. It is one issue. If they do another thing and distribute Bible, the people will become, it creates among the people some kind of bad thinking about this, the presence militant.
Colonel Julian, what's your response to that? That these sort of practices can actually increase opposition and resentment towards the U.S. Among Afghans?
No, actually, that's why I say that this type of reporting is irresponsible, because they've turned the story to make it appear that this proselytizing was being done with Afghans, when in fact, these were services on a U.S. base for U.S. service members only. And this was a year ago. If this was truly an issue for Brian Hughes at that point in time, why didn't he bring it to someone's attention then?
James, what's your response to that?
Well, it was a year ago, and our reporting has always made it clear it was a year ago. In addition to the Bible studies class where we show those Dari and Pashto Bibles, we've never said there was any evidence that they were distributed to Afghans, but we think it's an issue of public concern that should be brought up now, because there may be a wider problem here and they may be distributed to Afghans. And if an Afghan was to receive a Bible in Afghanistan, that might amount to a death sentence. In addition to that Bible studies class, we also showed pictures from a Sunday service given by the command chaplain at Bagram. Let me make that clear. That's the most senior chaplain at Bagram, one of the biggest bases in Afghanistan, Lieutenant Colonel Gary Hensley. It was filmed a year ago. He is still in that job. And in that job, in that sermon, he says to the congregation, hunt them down for Jesus, just like the special forces. In that sermon, I've listened to it all, he's not necessarily talking about Afghans, he doesn't say Afghans, but the rule on proselytizing in General Order Number 1 from Central Command isn't just restricted to Afghans. There are people of many different faiths serving in the US military, there are Muslims, there are Hindus, there are Christians, and the rule on proselytizing is also within the military. Is it right for the most senior chaplain in Bagram to be telling people, almost ordering people, this is a senior officer, is a lieutenant colonel, ordering his flock to go out and convert people?
Colonel Julian, what's your response to that?
Well, first of all, the chaplain is no longer here, so he's not currently in that job. And we allow, as I said earlier, for as much as possible for the various service members to practice their religion in their own way. Now, whether or not it was appropriate for him to be telling his students or his service members that they should proselytize, that's a discussion for the chaplain's corps, and I leave it to that.
But just to be clear about this, Colonel Julian, you haven't taken any disciplinary action against the people we saw in the tape, is that correct?
We just found out about this story yesterday morning, and we investigated to the best of our ability to find out what exactly took place. And we did learn that the books were confiscated and never distributed. It was one individual that received them from a church group back in the United States. And as far as where the chaplain currently is, we've learned today that he's back in the United States as well. So there will have to be more.
But will those in the tape be reprimanded in any way?
Pardon me?
Will those that we saw in the tape be reprimanded in any way?
Well, I can't see why the soldier that received the Bibles should be reprimanded, because they were not distributed. It's as if you were to tell me you were going to take a pastry from a bakery and I talked you out of it. Should you be punished? No. As far as any further action with the chaplain, I think that's up to the chaplain corps to look into and make a decision.
Mr. Asir, do these sort of incidents, these sort of practices potentially endanger the lives and the safety of US soldiers themselves in the country?
You know that they are in the only that the distribution of Bible is not put the soldiers in heavy condition or not trade their life, but they are now in fight with some people Their life already in danger and dangerous, but distribution, the bad dangerous is that the thought of the people of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan will think about the soldiers here very badly because, and they will think that they are here not for protection of Afghan people, but they are here for demolishing Islam, or they are here for fighting against Islam, and they are here for spreading the Christianity and other religions. It is very dangerous, then the dangerous of the life of the people, of the soldiers.
James, how damaging is this for the US military, for the image and perception of the US, given the sort of rhetoric we were hearing under the Bush administration about a crusade, about good versus evil? This was language that with religious rather than political connotations. How damaging is this for the US, particularly in countries like Afghanistan, where the US is facing some or much opposition to its presence?
Well, I think that's why this is an important story, because this is very politically sensitive. The colonel says that we shouldn't broadcast this because it's irresponsible, but surely planning to distribute Bibles in local languages in Afghanistan is certainly politically insensitive and could cause problems, and that's why it's important to raise this issue so that the military considers taking action. It's interesting he says that no one has been reprimanded, because in the tape that we broadcast, one of those soldiers says he did give Bibles while serving in Iraq, and it's interesting that the military don't seem to have launched any sort of investigation into this, or a formal investigation anyway.
Colonel Julian, what's your response to that? Because as James says, there do seem to be previous incidents of Bibles being distributed in that footage. We do hear one of the soldiers talk about distributing Bibles in Iraq, and throughout this conversation that the chaplain is nodding his head in agreement. At no point does he say that this is wrong.
Well, as I said earlier, we only learned of this just yesterday. And as far as what that soldier may or may not have done in Iraq is going to have to be looked at. But it may be very difficult to prove. I don't know how many years ago that this was, or whether he actually did it or was just bragging about it. But that's, you know, since we just learned about this yesterday morning, it's kind of hard to say that we would have already fully investigated it and disciplined somebody.
But will those previous incidents mentioned in the footage also be investigated?
At this moment, I honestly don't know. That will have to be a discussion with the leadership, and a decision will be made based on that.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to our guests for joining us in Kabul. Colonel Greg Julian, spokesman for the US forces in Afghanistan. Also in Kabul, Sayed Alam Uddin Asir. He's a member of the Islamic Front for Peace and Understanding, and in Washington, D.C., James Bays. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We, of course, welcome your comments and suggestions. Email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.